Welcome. We'll get started shortly. Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. There are no polling questions or attendance checks. Instead, you will demonstrate your knowledge by taking a brief multiple-choice quiz using the Earmark app. Visit earmark.app in your web browser. You can also download the mobile app by scanning the QR code on the screen. Log in, or if you're new, create your free account. Be sure to use a valid email address because that's where we'll send your course completion certificates. From the home screen, scroll down to find the course. You can also tap the magnifying glass icon to search for the course. Tap on the course artwork, then the Enroll button. On the Course tab, you'll find the recording and quiz questions. Complete the quiz to earn your CPE certificate. It takes us a few days to create the course on the app, so if you are attending this session live, please wait a few days. We'll email you a link to the course when it is ready. If you have questions or need help, email us at support@earmarkcpe.com. And now, on to the event.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session today. My name is Ben Gabriel. I'm the Director of Firm Experience at Collective by DBA. We're a community serving accounting firms, owners, leaders, and their teams. And then with me is Marcus Dillon. Marcus, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Marcus Dillon. I am the founder and president, also client CFO at DBA or Dillon Business Advisors. I'm also a part of Collective by DBA, where we, help other firm owners and leaders grow. And so it's exciting to be here with you today. And we are live, whether or not you're watching this live or watching it after the fact. This is actually live. So we may get pulled off the air for something that Ben does, but it's going to be a fun ride either way.
I'm definitely live right now, Marcus. I can tell you that. So,
Sweet.
All right, everybody. So our topic today is streamlining sales to service, mastering CAAS client onboarding. We've got a lot of really good things to talk through strategically, but also at a very detailed level too. I'm going to talk through our learning objectives very briefly, and then we'll kind of hit the ground running here. So 3 big things we're going to talk about: examining how productizing and simplifying your pricing can improve your client's experience and perceived value. Number 2, determining how to reduce the chaos and cost of onboarding with defined processes and pre-assigned responsibilities. And then examining how to develop systems that ensure exceptional communication from that client's initial inquiry with your firm all the way through to, really where we want to get to and what they bought from you, which is, your firm providing your monthly services to them. So those are the 3 things that are our overarching themes here. Marcus, if I asked you, we're going to go through some really good stuff for the next hour, but what's a thing or something that you'd like people to walk away from the session with?
Yeah, all of those are great points, Ben. What I would really encourage people and push people to think through throughout our time and then even after is how to bring team into each of these areas. And so at DBA and Collective, we believe in team, and really our motto is team serving team. So regardless if it's DBA or Collective, our hope for you today is that you can identify ways to bring others into these steps and allow you to kind of find your best spot on the team and then elevate others on your team as well.
Okay, bringing team into this and thinking about that.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, Marcus. So we have an acronym up on the screen right here, IDEAL. A lot of us have heard the term IDEAL, maybe in reference to ideal clients. So we'll start talking strategically about this. Remember, we're going to be talking about, improving and streamlining that onboarding process here. But before we go into this, could you give us just a little bit of a background about yourself and your firm so people can get an idea of maybe where you are or where you've come from and what kind of firm you are operating with your team?
Yeah, great. So we started a brick and mortar kind of legacy CPA firm, if you will, in 2011. We did that through an initial acquisition, did a couple more acquisitions along the way, and then got to the point right around 2017 where we had this inflection point of too many clients and how we were serving them wasn't what we intended to when we started out. So in 2017, we began the journey of kind of peeling back and really focusing on those that we were called to serve and serve them in ways that it was holistic and it was for their best interest. About that same time, we were also really building the team that was able to do that. So it was all kind of coming to a head right at that 2017 mark. We ballooned to a team of about 20 people. In 2017, we were doing right over $2 million of annual revenue, and we had thousands of clients, thousands of tax projects. And so we were about 80% tax, annual recurring revenue. And over those next few years, really when we started to look at team structure and look at the clients that we wanted to serve in a way that we wanted to serve them, we kind of righted the ship and we got it to where now today we're at about $3 million in annual revenue, but 70% of that revenue is through monthly recurring revenue. So CAAS touch points and ongoing services that a team provides to those clients. So we've seen the journey within DBA and we've learned a lot along the way, a lot what not to do. And that's really what we hope to share with others. We've learned a lot of good stuff that we want to teach you to do. But, I think the only way that I can get ROI on some of my previous failures is by sharing those with you so you don't make those same mistakes.
Got it. Okay. So I'm looking to streamline my onboarding process, Marcus. Now, For us, onboarding sits in the middle of two also very important things. We've got a sales element to our process. We've got onboarding in the middle of that process. And then we've got service, that obviously what we're providing to the clients. We've got sales, we've got onboarding, we've got service. So as those things relate to this acronym that we have up on the screen right here, IDEAL, it starts with identify clients. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So that first I, identify the clients that you feel called to serve, the ones that you actually like working with, and you think they may like working with you. So, over our history at DBA, we were lucky to have a roster of clients. Many were ideal and we didn't know it. And we just kind of really went to those relationships and gravitated toward them because the way that they took the advice that we gave and actually implemented it. The ones that we stayed away from, the ones that we always kind of sighed or grimaced when we saw an incoming call or an incoming email, those were non-ideal clients. And that's the easiest way to identify them. Who puts additional stress in your life? So we've always had ideal and we had more non-ideal than we wanted to admit. And as we started to identify who we like serving, we didn't have to go much further than our own client list. And so for us, it was professional service providers, people that labor was their biggest cost that we had to navigate. And then we also saw that it was clients that were in really $1.5 to $5 million of revenue. And that allowed enough budget for our team to really be in place and really serve them well. The other thing that we identified was it was single family owners. So it was those three things that really kind of bubbled up as like truly ideal when it came to providing these CAAS services at DBA.
So you have a really good feeling and a really good idea of who you are best set up to serve. Fair?
That's fair.
Okay. So then, and maybe the next one's obvious then, D for defined services, but what does that mean?
Yeah, in our world, so we were doing it all back then, and we were doing tax, we were do ad hoc advisory if need be, but a lot of compliance. And so as we started to filter out and focus on ideal clients, you then ask the question of how do you want to serve those folks? And we would always try to go a step above just a tax return or just a set of financials and give advisory or give commentary with it. So in that, that's what clients started to ask for more of. And in addition to that, we were also starting to get into those sticky ongoing monthly services. So we like to pair advisory with sticky services, whether those services are payroll, tax, or accounting. We like to go one step above and say, hey, we're going to do this because this is the minimum that the business needs. But here's the icing on the cake, and that's the advisory piece. That's actually talking through what those results are, what to watch out for in your business, and taking it one step further. So those holistic service offerings where we actually bundled and then layered in different levels of advisory. is where we got to and where we're at today. So we took those sticky services, everything that we wanted to do at a minimum for every ideal client, and then we added along a piece of advisory along the way.
Okay, so you've defined this is what we need to do, want to do for our clients. This is what we're going to do. And then we're going to add in that layer above that in a way that we call advisory. Make sense?
Correct.
Okay. So explore pricing and team. That to me sounds like a couple different things happening at once.
Yeah. So how do you provide those services? And for us, as mentioned earlier, it was team serving team. And so we come alongside a business that really has other team members internally, whether that's a back office staff or an office manager. Maybe they've also got some technicians or production folks in their industry, whether it's a medical office, dental office, some other professional service. We like to support that team. And the way that we do that is through our team members. So a lot of this and at different parts of the journey in DBA revolved around me as the leader or as the founder. And for us to kind of track the business that we wanted to build, we actually started to delegate and really elevate other team members to provide services to those ideal clients. So we started to play with team structure, and where we're at today with our team of 3 model, we can fully serve that client with a team of 3 folks. That is a client service manager, a client controller, and a client CFO. Each of them have their own unique responsibilities as part of the team. And in doing that, you have to create the appropriate amount of budget for those services. And that's where price comes into play. So in that pricing, we also looked at the revenue of our ideal clients to make sure that we never were a luxury or a burden on the business. So those businesses that were $1.5 to $5 million in revenue, we know we could come into that business and do a lot of great work for a budget percentage of 1% to 2%. And that's where we kind of land on that, okay, $1,500 a month up to $2,500 or $3,000 a month, depending on how complex things are and how often they want that advisory. So that's where we landed, that 1% to 2%. And that gives us more than enough budget to fully serve that client with a team.
Okay, so back to the team theme that you brought up at the beginning. You have a team of people at the office. In your case, a team of 3 people, but a team nonetheless that are serving that client. And the services are priced in a way that there's budget enough to support that. Is that
Correct.
good? Okay.
And that's something we had to learn along the way, from a team of 1. A lot of times that may fall on a founder, and then delegating it, bringing others into that journey of service, and, making sure that it was the right fit to where we're at today, where that team of 3 really is the sweet spot and having a proper delegation in place.
All right, Marcus, we've got an A and an L left here on our strategic slide. Act on services and then look to improve. What do those 2 mean?
So act on services is actually that what we're providing for the clients, that they're actually taking that advice, deliverable, compliance project and actually putting it into use. So a lot of times that does come back to advisory. And so those recommendations, those insights that we're providing, whether it's on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis, that those are helping the family, the ownership, and the business stabilize, improve, grow, whatever their goals are. So act on the services that you are providing, because as accountants, especially as tax accountants, I know that we are very proud of the puzzle we put together, i.e. the tax return. And whenever we slide that tax return across the table to that client, we think it is worth all the money that we kind of aligned the invoice to. But how do they take those services or even that deliverable and act upon it? So that's where that A comes into place. That last letter in ideal, the L, look to improve, is just that constant iteration of improvement in our businesses and constant ways to find ways to help our clients improve their businesses. So it's not static. It's not from start to finish. It's a constant journey, and it's a circle whenever you lay it out that way.
Okay. So Marcus, we've set a good strategic baseline here. Identify the right clients you want to serve, have a defined set of services, pricing established, a team to support the clients, and then certainly on an ongoing basis, working with those clients. And of course, looking to get better at what we do. So let's go into the details now, or let's go a little bit further into the details. And I'm just going to bring up this entire, what we've labeled overall process onto the screen. And there's three main elements. There's three overall elements to this. There's a sales element, like we said, there's an onboarding element, and then there's the ongoing service element. We use the acronym SOS here. So this is the overall process. Can you kind of just paint us a picture from sales to service, knowing that we're going to go through this in more detail step by step?
Yeah, I think as growth-minded entrepreneurs, most of the people that are likely watching this, if you're thinking about onboarding, that's because you're growing, that you're adding new clients, and you want to think through ways to do that differently. It was no different than on our journey at DBA. So we started with sales. Then there's going to be a handoff to what does that onboarding look like? How do you get that client on the bus? And then over all the way to ongoing service, right? So whether that's the same team or a different team, we've done it all. We've done all different types of variations of these three things. And I'm excited to share with you what's working best for us right now and where we've landed. And so as you can see, we've even put some timeline around this. So 0 to 4 weeks is that sales process, and taking that from prospect to client all the way to onboarding. You've got client who's now signed the engagement letter to how do you get them onto recurring services done by that team, as we previously mentioned. So it's going to be fun, but this is a great overview slide, Ben, to have people think about, like, what does the timeline really look like?
Okay. So here's the big picture. Nothing earth shattering here. Makes sense. Sales, onboarding, and service. Let's peel things back a little bit, Marcus, and let's start talking about sales. And like you said, we've kind of said, hey, 0 to 4 weeks overall in this process from the first time that, let's say, the prospect visits your website or maybe has a conversation with somebody through welcome email here, 0 to 4 weeks. So what's happening in each of these different phases?
Yeah. So this sales process, the 0 to 4 weeks, in a perfect world, you have a qualified lead that you've been introduced through. Maybe it's through a referral or an existing client that has come into your orbit, so to speak. They visited your website and they're ready to take that next step to move forward. So in this first conversation, they've already essentially looked at maybe your website, what services you provide. If you have pricing on your website, which DBA does have pricing on our website, they've seen whether or not your services are a fit from what they're in the market for, and then what price or what budget they have to pay for those services. And the reason why DBA, after so many years, actually put pricing on our website was to really give a benchmark of what our services are and the budget that's needed for those team of three. And another kind of goal in that is to be polarizing. So we put our pricing on our website to be polarizing. That way, if a prospect comes in and that price is just outside of their budget, they immediately opt out of continuing that prospect journey with our team, and they go down the road to find their true service provider. If that service is in line pricing wise with their budget, then they actually start to learn more and sell themselves. That way, that first conversation is much easier to have versus somebody that's learning pricing or potential budget for the first time. So be polarizing. If you have questions about putting pricing on your website, I think it's something that you should really consider more, because that's where we're all at today as service providers operating today. So that first conversation leads, it's typically with Rachel, who is by default an owner of DBA, as my wife. And what is really happening is reinforcing what they learned on the website. So why are we having this conversation today? On the back side of that, they'll have some additional follow-up. So they'll send over a QBO file and tax returns so we can review those for pricing. So we'll nail down budget and then really present that in the second phase of this to when it is that engagement letter deliverable. And that's where pricing is presented. We kind of true that up just a little bit if it's any different than what's on our website. And in doing that, between those two steps, it's really, is there something else that we need to request? Was there a surprise? Did we see an investment or a business listed on the tax return that, hey, this was not a part of that initial conversation? And if so, we just want to bring it to light right then before an engagement letter is sent over.
So Marcus, you mentioned Rachel there. Can you just give us a little bit of an idea of Rachel's role, let's say at the firm or in particular in the sales process?
Yeah. Rachel is the first point of contact for DBA when it comes to prospects and referral sources. So she is an advocate for our referrals and existing clients. Most people know Rachel that are a part of DBA, whether it's from a referral standpoint or an existing client standpoint. And she's the best person over the years, has become the best person to be that first point of contact because she's not in production. And so a lot of the questions that are maybe more technical in nature, she doesn't have the ability to answer those and give away too much during the sales process or prospect phase. She actually listens for pain points, listens for ways to help and how to serve them, and really thinks about it from how can our team better serve this person. So she's got a willingness to talk with people and the availability because she is not in production. And the other thing with that is she is, as a helper, really making sure that she leaves someone better off than she found them from a prospect phase. And even that means sometimes referring them to another CPA firm.
So Rachel's managing the sales process. She's in charge. Got
Yep.
it. So at this point, you've had the pricing conversation, or Rachel's had the pricing conversation, the service conversation. You've reviewed things internally. You send out an engagement letter, client signs. What's the last step in the last step in the sales process on this slide? And then we'll certainly talk about some things that help it. What's the last step?
Yeah, so I would say this whole sales process, Rachel is primarily the driver on our team. As that first point of contact, I'm there to give light to where pricing should be, given my technical hat. Also, as an owner, we've seen that owners really need to spend about 60% of their time doing business development or sales or prospecting, and that's where their time is best spent. So for me and Rachel, our time as far as ROI is really important during this phase. So there are a few conversations that Rachel leads. I'm usually in the background supporting Rachel through pricing it the correct way. And then that last step in this process, Ben, that welcome email, it's providing those next steps after we've gotten the engagement letter signed, after we've got ACH information in the first month and onboarding captured. Then it provides that next step of welcome email where we're welcoming them onto the process of onboarding as a client of DBA. And so then we start to expand the team that serves them beyond Rachel and beyond me in the background.
Okay, so then, at that point, we're starting to make the transition into onboarding, Marcus, but we'll take a breather here. Where we're definitely going for is we're going for that really pretty looking office on the right. That's actually my office. No, that's not my office, but it's definitely not my office on the left there. So I think what we're obviously trying to say here is we're trying to make things as clear as possible, starting with those initial conversations with the client. This is what we do. This is our fee. And we're trying to make things as clear as possible. Is that fair?
It is fair. And I think where we came from this over the different years of our sales process, from me taking the phone calls as the owner who had the technical expertise, you give away a lot during that. But then also as CPAs or accountants, we want to serve people. We want to help people and leave them better off than we found them. So a lot of times we would say yes to engagements that either revolved only around us or that we really shouldn't be saying yes to. They weren't being able to be done by a team or weren't being something that we were investing in as far as back to that ideal services and ideal client. But we just felt bad telling somebody no. So Rachel came into this role and her office never looked like that one on the left. She's always kept it pretty tidy and had things together. But even early on, when we didn't have some of these ideal services, ideal clients, even pricing figured out, Rachel would take the call. She would put them on hold and then ask, hey, do we do this? Like this service this prospect is asking about, do we even do that? And then if the answer is yes, how do we price for it? How can I give this person a budget of what to prepare for? And so we've probably all been there in our businesses where during the early days or during some transitions, you may say yes to some things that you shouldn't. And we had to learn through that the hard way. So now Rachel is fully equipped to have a lot of those conversations in that previous slide where it was that 0 to 4 weeks. on her own. I'm in the background. She's really the hero in that part of the journey, guiding the client or the prospect along the way to the handoff to onboarding.
Okay, so if we know that we don't want our office to look like that picture on the left, what does clarity look like? So, Marcus, we already kind of talked down some of the check boxes on the left and the welcome email on the right, but let's take an extra couple of minutes or so. We talked about package services. We talked about ideal client definitions. What does person in charge mean?
Yeah, person in charge is really who's gonna be the point person on the team, given different responsibilities, different stages of that life cycle. Moving from sales to onboarding to service, clearly defining that and making sure that the client knows who to reach out to at any step along the way. So, person in charge is pretty important. It's elevating that person to be able to serve that client or that prospect during that phase.
Okay, and then the response process.
Yeah, the response process, it needs to be timely, right? Because whether they are a prospect and they're in buying mode, I think it's just all the research has proved the quicker your response time, the more appropriate it is, the more likely they are to become a client and spend money with your business. So the faster response time, as opposed to getting bogged down by production work or different times of year, and that drags response time down. I think having a consistent response time across the year is also key. And that's part of the reason why Rachel, as somebody that is not production or is not a technician, is leading that sales conversation.
And then engagement letter and payment collection. Are you guys doing this digitally? How are you guys handling that part of it?
Yeah, we want this whole process to be digitally. So, we have now moved into where DBA is full remote, virtual team. All of this is handled over video call, including the digital process of delivering the engagement letter and receiving the payment information. So we don't celebrate a new client coming onto the bus until we receive that signed engagement letter and payment info. And so that first payment draw is their first monthly fee plus their onboarding fee. So those are two things that kind of kick off the journey and kind of pass the baton from sales to onboarding. And I would say throughout this process, whatever system you use, whether it's something like Ignition, which has engagement letters and payment processing built into it, all the way to a CRM, there is automation and different response times that you can build into this. And you don't have to be sitting at your computer with your email up to be sending these. We live in a very digital world right now where these automations are easy to set up and can be done. And it makes you look really up to speed on where you're at and how you're going to serve them moving forward.
We'll come back to that onboarding fee just a little bit later, Marcus, so we can talk about exactly what that means. But as we're making the way into the onboarding part of this, certainly a big thing for me is, hey, we're sending a welcome email to that client. Hey, welcome to DBA, we're glad to have you as a client. Here's what's next. Here's what you can expect immediately out of the gate. So what are some of those things that you're putting inside of that welcome email?
Yeah, that welcome email is providing them a guide. And so we also have an additional guide where it kind of shows who their team will be. So on our side, as this prospect is going through the sales phase, our leadership team is actually going through and building that team of 3 that ultimately may serve that client and has capacity to serve that new client. So we're already identifying who that CSM, that client controller, and that CFO are going to be. And within that, we drop those folks, their pictures, their bios, and what they do into an onboarding guide. And they get that delivered as part of that welcome email. They also get some administrative roles, like our tax admin, Deidre. They get to know her in that guide as well as Rachel, who was a part of their sales journey. So that process is pretty streamlined. We actually may build out a new onboarding guide for that client, but a lot of times it's very similar teams serving very similar industry clients. So we've probably already got that teed up and ready to go. But it just also identifies the roles and responsibilities on our side, who to go to, what level of team member to go to for whether it's a payroll question, a tax question, or an advisory, just a business planning question. So I think those are some of the pieces that we've learned along the way. And that has set us up for success now and creates a much better onboarding process where that client feels a little bit educated. They feel a little bit more a part of the team even before they start that onboarding.
Okay. So as we now make the transition from sales to onboarding, we've talked a little bit about that, Marcus. I'm just going to bring up, some things that are happening internally. So the welcome email's gone out to the client, introducing them to their team, things like that. Now, what's happening, I say behind the scenes of the client, but what's happening in the office there as the firm, as the team begins to prepare for that client's onboarding?
Yeah, and it's funny you said what's happening in the office. So what's happening virtually in the office, I would say, which we use Microsoft Teams. Other firms out there use Slack. So within Teams, we're posting in our winning channel, hey, we just received this new client. Here's the team of 3. And we go ahead and tag those folks. And in that process, after that winning announcement is made, that kind of prepares the team on what's next. So internally, they know that they're receiving this new client. It's probably not a surprise to them because we know that they have capacity and we've had those conversations with them. The next step is Deidre, our tax admin, who also sets up different tasks in our practice management software. She's off to the races building out some of the file structure that's needed for those clients and the recurring nature of those tasks or practice management items that are needed within our practice management software, just to make sure that we stay up to date on the different things that we're responsible for, whether it's payroll, bill pay, monthly financials, tax returns, all that good stuff. She's our point person for that. And then after we've already received the client QBO data because they invited us in to do that before pricing was really finalized. And then we also have their most recent tax returns. So as part of that, the internal team at this time, they're also proforming those tax returns into our tax software, making sure that things match. There's also a review done by the client controller to make sure there's nothing kind of odd with their tax situation that stands out and needs to be corrected or amended. So all of that is done during this internal transition, if you will. And then they go into that kickoff call with the client a little bit more educated just because they spent some time getting to know that client before they get introduced to that client.
Got it. Okay. So the team's preparing, getting more ready to get introduced to that client. So inside of the kickoff meeting or during the kickoff meeting, what's happening?
Yeah, so this is that last email, that welcome email was inviting them to pick a time to actually schedule that kickoff call. So that's that kickoff call. It's an introduction of team, that team of 3 that's serving them. Also, Rachel's in that call because up until this point, maybe they've only interacted with Rachel. And so in that call, we're kind of passing the baton over to that onboarding team, which is the same team as the service team. So our service team is also the person or the people that are doing the onboarding. And then in that, we make introductions. They actually see the real humans on the other side of the screen and get to talk to them. And then we set some expectations on both sides, make sure any questions are answered. And I don't know that I mentioned the previous SOS call that team went through. So prior to that kickoff call, there is an SOS call that our team has where Rachel and myself or anyone else that was involved in that prospect or sales phase kind of gets all of our thoughts or things that we knew to be true over to the team. Like, hey, you need to know about this. They asked about this. Here's some things that may be unique to this situation. So that was shared before this external kickoff call. And then that team's able to take that information and be more prepared to actually listen to the client and maybe some of the pain points that they've got during their first introduction.
How long so you just talked about the SOS call internally. Thanks for going back and hitting that, Marcus. Yeah. For the kickoff meeting itself, that first time that everyone's getting introduced to each other, team to client, client to team, and so on.
Yeah.
How long does that call last?
It's typically only 30 minutes. So it can be as fast as 30 minutes if there's additional time that's needed. That allows for follow-up from maybe the client CFO is able to have a conversation on the other side of that kickoff call. But really, our team is coming to that with some recommendations because they've already reviewed the file. Maybe they reviewed the chart of accounts and says, hey, like we need to just update that and get approval from the client at that point. And that's really the best use of that time to make sure that we do hit the ground running after that kickoff call to really have a fast and smooth onboarding.
Okay, so let's look now at just the overall picture. Oops. Let's look at the overall picture here. So you just talked about the kickoff. We're looking at the overall onboarding process taking 2 to 6 weeks. Got an onboarding piece and then complete financials there I'm seeing at the end of it. So can you talk us a little bit through the onboarding phase here before we get to complete financials?
Yeah, so that onboarding phase, as you mentioned, it could be anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks in an ideal setting. And that's what, we were seeing before we really tightened this up. We were seeing about 6 weeks, maybe even longer. So that the beginning of that process starts at the end of that kickoff call. So once that kickoff call happens, the clocks officially turn on, and we'll get to why whenever that kickoff call ends. And the client knows what they need to bring to the team. The team has maybe said what they're going to be doing over the next few weeks as far as setup or pro formas and optimization, all the way through during that 2 to 6 weeks, whether it's cleanup, and we go through the chart of accounts, we clean things up, and we want to do a really good job of scrubbing the client data and making sure that at the end of that onboarding, we are going to be responsible for the financials moving forward. So if there's any type of cleanup, old accounts that need to get, adjusted or reconciled, that all happens in that 2 to 6 week period. And onboarding finishes up once that first set of financials is issued. So once that first set of financials goes out, then it's kind of on the bus of recurring monthly services, where in our world, we really want to see the CSM kind of wrap up their responsibilities by the 10th or the 12th of the month. And the financials that are issued by the client controller, those go out by the 15th of the following month.
Okay, so, and we'll kind of come back through and hit some of these things in a little bit more detail, Marcus. But if I heard you right, 2 to 6 weeks, and we'll talk a little bit about the 2-week side of this and what that means inside the firm there. But that dividing line between, hey, onboarding is done, we are now into our regular rhythm with that client, which is where we want to be, is delivering that first set of financials. Is that right?
You're exactly spot on. So if there's any type of compliance, that's also getting done. But for us, CAAS is really being driven by financial data, including the financials that go out on a monthly basis. So that kind of creates the end, or a good end, to this process.
Okay. So what kinds of things have we determined makes onboarding better or helps onboarding? And we've got 3 things here: defined roles, who is responsible for what, a defined workflow, if I can say it, who is doing what and when, and then finally incentives. And we'll get into a checklist here and incentives momentarily, but thoughts on these 3 things?
Yeah, I think the defined roles is very important, regardless if it's onboarding or service. And so, as we'll show here in a bit, that same team that's servicing that client, that CSM, that client controller, and that client CFO, they've got very defined roles. And part of what they do on an ongoing basis is also kind of goes back to that onboarding phase. And it's no different than maybe what they do as far as in service, but it's just a little bit more of a cleanup project for that team. And that team, because they are involved in onboarding, we have paid attention to their capacity. We know that they're willing to accept a new client. And part of that is they've got capacity to onboard that client. So that's that defined roles. The defined workflow is who is doing what and when. There's communication happening behind the scenes, not necessarily with the client, all throughout onboarding with that team. We actually set up a specific onboarding channel per client. So whenever that client comes into that onboarding phase, we create a shared Teams channel with that team of 3, Rachel and myself and Deidre, to make sure that if any questions need to be addressed timely, that team is in sync on our side within our communication system, which is Teams. And the other part of that is incentives. So just like any other way that you can kind of align compensation with what you want to see happen in the business, onboarding is no different. So because we want onboarding to be a very good experience for that new client, we have allocated some budget internally, compensation wise, to make sure that that is a goal of everybody.
Okay, so we'll go deeper into these here momentarily, but Marcus, you said the word capacity. What are some things that people can be doing to start paying attention to, or maybe getting a better handle on? Do they have capacity? Does their team have capacity? And if so, how much capacity do they have? What kinds of things do you pay attention to, or people can be paying attention to there?
Yeah, capacity can be a discussion all on its own, but I would say the immediate things are people working within the time frame that they've committed to on both sides. So like as a team member has someone that's committed to 24 hours a week, are they staying within that amount of budget, or are they consistently going outside of that 24 hours or 40 hours a week and they just can't get it all done? What that tells me is that maybe there's some opportunities to reflect on capacity or process improvement and become more effective, more efficient. But overall, it just tells me that they probably don't have much capacity for a new client. On the other side of that, if somebody is constantly, finishing their work before their day ends and they're asking for work, that's an easy way to see if capacity does exist. And I would say there's multiple different tests and multiple different ways to build capacity in your firm. Collective, we have some of those resources, plenty of webinars that we've done and conversations we've had over the years, but those are the two ways that are easiest to see if you're outside of your existing capacity or you do have capacity within your firm.
Okay. So what in helping with onboarding, defined roles, defined workflow, coming back to those things specifically, we're working off a checklist here. So we've got kind of a snippet of a set of tasks that are a part of our onboarding process. Got a few of them listed here. Can you kind of talk through the big parts of this checklist? First of all, where do you manage this checklist? Where does it live? Who's paying attention to this checklist? And then, at the very end of it, we already talked about reviewing financials and that confirms onboarding is complete. Where's that tracked, and how do you know when it's actually completed?
Yeah, so this checklist, it's actually available to all of the people on the other side of the camera today. So we'll actually give you this full checklist. It's actually a document that you can take and make it your own. So we'll kind of point to that at the end, how you can get this. But these are just the basics that we've seen with every onboarding as far as the minimum required by role. And so a lot of this, if you're an accountant and how to roll retained earnings forward, it's who does that. The controller is usually the best person to do that. And then CSM is the one updating all those bank feeds. So those are just a few examples of what those steps are, and then notes. So you just want it all in one place. For us at DBA, we're not looking to onboard any more than 2 new clients per month. So we aren't looking to grow by leaps and bounds, but even 2 onboardings per month, especially when I'm able to allocate those to each pod within DBA, it's a lot. It's a lot of moving pieces. So we would just want to make sure that that is done well, and that new client's relationship starts off on the right foot. And then all of this kind of leads and culminates to when onboarding is done, it's this checklist has been filled out, right? So maybe some things don't apply, but a lot of it probably does. And we've kind of got this checklist filled out, and then that first set of financials is out the door. And then it's just on to the next as far as what other ongoing services is that client going to need once they pass over into service.
So you're noting when these tasks are done, Marcus, and then certainly at the very end, I see the CFO role, and we'll talk about controller or CSM controller and CFO responsibilities a little bit here. But I'm taking it that the CFO then is noting, hey, the onboarding process is complete. We're good. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, they're the ones closing this out. So we actually have a special onboarding project for every new client set up in our practice management software. And that's where the time is coded to onboarding. So we can really see what that looked like. And then actually from a timing perspective, how long onboarding took, because that was started after that initial kickoff call. That was the date it began. And then whenever that CFO says, yep, the financials went out, I'm completing that whole project of onboarding, then we know it was done. And was it done within 2 weeks? Was it done within 6? So I think those are a lot of the pieces that we look at.
Okay. So I bet most folks that are watching this or listening on this probably have their own version of their onboarding checklist. But I think it is always really cool to see how other folks are handling things. So we can definitely make that available to people as well. So we talked about kind of the definition of the process, who's responsible for what and when. The other thing, Marcus, you talked about that is our incentives. So I'm going to kind of put up a chart here a little bit step by step for people in terms of onboarding incentives. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put up this first box, which says implementation fee, $7,500. Earlier in the session, you mentioned an onboarding fee. Can we kind of come back to that and talk a little bit about what this means for DBA, what this implementation fee really allows for?
Yeah, so implementation fee and onboarding fee, those are the same language. I think a lot of people just understand onboarding versus implementation, but you can use that however you want. But we found it important to charge for onboarding. And so for us right now, it's listed on our website, a $7,500 fee. This is one of those where, as you'll see as we build out the slide, this is really the budget that's necessary to do onboarding well. Just some of those heavier lifts during that initial conversation of getting people on the bus, that cleanup that's necessary, those back, not tax, but just getting their monthlies caught up and clean does need budget. So this used to be a variation of a multiple of their monthly fee. So at one point this was 2 times their monthly fee, then 3 times their monthly fee, to the point now where it's $7,500, which is about our average. We want those clients to come in at around $2,500 a month. So it's about 3 times their monthly fee. And also implementation fee is one of those relief valves that Rachel and I have at our disposal. If we do want to have conversations and ways to get prospects on the bus or to sign, we could reduce this, or we could just spread it out over 3 months or over 6 months to make it less of a financial burden. So that's something that we do on the sales side. I'd much rather kind of get creative on an implementation fee than the monthly fee that goes to our team on an ongoing basis. So, but would highly recommend, if you aren't charging for onboarding, or if you're not charging enough, to increase that fee, because all the research we've done with prospects and other firms, clients now are expecting to pay something at the beginning just because the lift that goes along with becoming a new client, they just expect it. And so we just onboarded a large client, and he had multiple entities, and he, during that process, was definitely okay paying a cost. He realized that any change is going to come at a cost, and he'd rather allocate budget on that front end to make sure that we paid attention and we had a better onboarding process than dragging out the inefficiency. So would highly recommend an onboarding fee or an implementation fee.
Okay, so just to make sure everybody's knows where we are here, we're starting the timer. We've had the kickoff call with the client. The onboarding timer, so to speak, is started, and we already talked about that 2 to 6 week window. So let's frame this up in terms of what incentives are in place at the firm, Marcus, and how those work and why they're important. So the goal is 2 weeks. Is that fair?
It is. Well, and some onboardings just can't get done in 2 weeks. So as firm owners, as leaders, we determined that this was going to go to our team. And so a portion of this is paid out to our team. So what you've seen here is the onboarding incentive or implementation incentive that we rolled out this year and that has been successful. It's helped our process kind of be a little bit sooner than that 6 weeks. So as you see, Ben, you've kind of shown the complete model of that plan. So we'll take 50% of that negotiated implementation fee. In this example, it's the full fee of $7,500. And part of it is now we push for that because it goes to the team. And the 4 team members that are mainly involved in onboarding are the administrative team. In our case, it's that tax admin, Deidre, the client service manager, the client controller, and the client CFO, which are that team of 3. And then we allocate that incentive based on the time that onboarding takes to get done and based on the amount of work that each role is doing. So as you can see, the admin team, they get 10%, the CSM and the controller, they get 40 each. And then that CFO, who's really just nurturing the client relationship, also supporting the team in whichever way they can, they're also getting 10% to make sure that that kind of goes smoothly. And so full Payout occurs if it's 2 weeks or less, which we've been actually hitting that on a lot of onboards, all the way through at if it lasts more than 6 weeks, there's not any additional incentive to pay out because a lot of that has just gone out the door in inefficiency and additional payroll costs to get this client on the bus. But if the team is willing to kind of step up and get things going and look at things that are really can be cleaned up during this process, we are more than willing as leaders to share that revenue with them.
So it's clear, Marcus, folks are incentivized, to do their best to get that client onboarded and up to speed as quickly as possible. It looks pretty clear, pretty transparent. Anything else to add on the incentives right now?
Yeah, I would say we rolled this out mid-year. We've done it for about 6 to 7 onboards, and the team, they seem to be asking better questions than we ever saw previously. They are going into those client kickoff calls ready to roll up their sleeves, ready to get approval on any changes that need to be made in QBO, or even really taking ownership of that client relationship that much sooner. So I'll say that was kind of the insight that we saw after rolling this out. Not to say everybody's motivated by additional compensation or money, but it helps. And so what we've done is align ways to make additional compensation with what we see that we want to happen in the firm. And we are so focused on making onboarding a smooth and efficient process that we put dollars to it. The final thing that I'll say about this incentive is it's actually paid out timely. We don't hold this back for a payout at a later date. Some of our other incentives are paid 3 times a year. This is actually paid on the payroll that's immediately following the onboarding being complete, because we want those team members who are involved in onboarding and are getting this incentive to have that much more of a reason and that immediate kind of benefit to being involved in a very fast and efficient onboarding.
Got it, Marcus. Okay, so we've talked about sales, we've talked about onboarding. Now we're right where we want to be, and I'll bring everything up on the screen here. But we're right where we want to be, which is to start serving that client. So we've just got a few bullets up here and what helps make that transition from onboarding into providing services. So can you talk through what helps this transition into ongoing services?
Yeah, once that baton has passed and that first set of financials has gone out, then they are on the wheel of service. And then it's kind of mainly on to that team of 3. And each part of that team has their own roles. And so as far as how they work behind the scenes to really fully serve that client, they're doing that. And then externally, they're also recommending that the client, book their advisory call or their first advisory meeting. The CFO has also been there along this whole journey. So they're already building rapport and kind of creating a new relationship with that client. So it's not uncommon to have that touch point along the way, but having that first true advisory based on clean financials and things that your team was involved in. For client CFOs, we can pick up those financials and really start going to town and doing great things and kind of aligning the financial results with that client's goals.
Okay, so we're getting towards the end of what we're talking through, Marcus, but you've talked about it a number of times, something you call team of 3. We've seen the administrative team listed. We've seen client service manager, client controller, client CFO. I've brought the key roles and responsibilities up on the screen. Could you talk through each of the 3 roles?
Yeah. So client service manager, a lot of people would consider us an accountant or a bookkeeper. This is somebody we've elevated as that client service manager. They are taking point on everything that's on that screen. So QBO, payroll, asking different questions along the way. CSMs have the most contact with our clients. And so as we talked about earlier, building out services that can be done by a team. A CSM is very important in this team and important in client service. So they handle a lot of responsibility. They're also the ones that are communicating with clients for payroll and just all the things that could be done typically if you weren't as structured, maybe done by an owner or done by a leader that's juggling a lot of different things. So client service manager is the majority of the budget for these services ongoing. Then you have client controller. A lot of people would consider this a tax senior or tax manager, somebody that has a background in tax, because as you can see, a lot of those tax responsibilities are at this client controller level. they're also issuing the monthly financials that they've reviewed, that the CSM has helped prepare. They're issuing those hopefully before the 15th of the month that follows. And they're doing that with voiceover commentary. That way that client is a little bit better educated on the results of their financials or their tax deliverable if it was a compliance project. So that's a side note that we always kind of provide commentary over any deliverable we have. And then the other thing to point out is they're actually helping manage the CSM and their responsibilities. So they're supporting them and they're making sure that they feel equipped in order to do their CSM role. That final part of the team of three is that client CFO. So that's director level or above. And they're really thinking through growth strategy. They're helping support the whole team, client service manager, client controller, and they're coming alongside the client on that journey of business ownership. So truly kind of taking the sticky services that go along with some of the things that are provided by a CSM and client controller, and really adding, as mentioned earlier, that icing on the cake of advisory.
We talked at the beginning, Marcus, you talked at the beginning about team, and this is it, a defined set of roles and responsibilities, and then each client having their, use the word pod earlier, but maybe define that in 1 second, but each client has a defined team that's serving them. And, in each person has their set of things that they're responsible for. But when you said pod earlier, what did that mean?
Yeah, so a pod is a full team. So a client CFO in theory should lead multiple client controllers. We've settled on 2. And then a client controller should lead multiple CSMs. We've settled on 2. So a full pod would be 4 CSMs, 2 client controllers, and 1 CFO. So that's 7 people that can really serve a whole, host of clients. And to take it one step further, one team of 3 within that pod is what we would call a leg. So a certain leg of a pod is a specific CFO, client controller, and CSM team. And the other cool thing that we've learned is within those legs, that's where you can build up industry specialization. We have those with dental and vet pods and different legs of those pods. So really cool things once you've structured the team and actually once you've aligned what they could be doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to help serve the client.
We looked at this as a continuum through our session today with sales, onboarding, and service as a continuum. But, here's what that probably really looks like is it's a circle in that continuum, and that sales is feeding the onboarding is leading into service. And then we're looking to, when we find that next ideal client, we're looking to repeat that process and certainly probably make tweaks and adjustments to it to improve things. Is that fair?
Yeah, even though we said 60% of the owner's time is really spent on business development, a majority of your sales opportunities are going to come from your existing service, whether it's existing clients looking to expand or add new business opportunities, also referrals from your best clients, from those ideal clients. And that's where we've seen just the most opportunity. So this whole process needs to be very good and continuous.
All right, Marcus, I'm going to put a QR code up on the screen here in a minute for folks to scan if they're interested in a resource or to know more from us. I'll go ahead and do that. Any final thoughts from you on, streamlining your CAAS client onboarding process?
So onboarding can be as brutal as you make it. I would say we've lived through different variations of onboarding over our life as a firm, to the point now where it's a very smooth and defined process. We are more than happy to share those resources with you at our collective website. So if you follow this QR code, you can definitely do that. And if you want the power of community, I would definitely recommend that you learn about Collective. If you want the accountability that comes with small groups and mastermind groups, you could learn more about our forums. Or if you just want the growth that comes along with one-on-one coaching for your firm, there's an opportunity to do that within Collective as well. So, but as our gift to you, we definitely want to leave you with those resources that we've pointed to and talked about today.
Make sure you scan that QR code, everybody. So with that, Marcus, thank you so much. It's great to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking us through things. We love to talk to folks here at Collective. But we really appreciate your time. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for leading it, Ben.
Today's event has ended. To earn CPE, go to earmark.app or scan the QR code on the screen. Then log in or create your free account. Search for the course by tapping on the magnifying glass icon on the home screen and then entering the name of this event. It takes a few days to make the course, so if you're attending this event live, keep an eye out for an email letting you know when the course is available. Pass the quiz to earn your CPE, then tap the button to email yourself a certificate. Stay tuned for more events from Earmark. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.